Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sam and Cole podcast. Thanks again to Champion Cycling. There are three locations, Arlington, the Beach, and Mandarin, for their continued support now into 2016. If you didn't get everything you needed for Christmas, stop by one of those places, say hi to the guys, tell them we sent you in. And I'm sure they'll give you a deal, because anything they got left over after Christmas, they want to move, because the 2016 stuff is coming in. Cole, the Jaguars finished 5-11. And will get the fifth pick in the NFL draft in 2016. Today, Gus Bradley had to go out of his way to say that it wasn't representative of he thought that the strides that the Jaguars made forward. But I'm wondering whether it wasn't kind of indicative of where the team actually is when you're talking about force on force, and the Jaguars were unable to withstand that. Bortles didn't play well. Of the 8 sacks, 4 of them were probably his fault. 4 of them were probably the 2 tackles' faults. I just thought that if you're going to talk about winning the division, you got to beat teams in the division. You've got to at least be in the game. And you never got the sense that the Jaguars were in this game. I know it's the last game of the year, but you never got the sense that the Jaguars were really in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there was a point of the game where it looked like the Jaguars were used up, whether they were not trying. I mean, a lot of people like to go to the they've given up thing, and I'm not sure that was necessarily the case, but where they looked like they were done. They were used up. There were a couple of guys who really kept playing, as you would, some guys you would really imagine: Allen Robinson, Paul Postlesny, and a few others, but I think this was the end. I think it was the end of a long and disappointing season, but not as disappointing as previous seasons. So it is a step forward. And one thing people are talking about a lot is this team really better? And a lot of the folks, especially Jaguars fans, who did not want to see Gus Bradley brought back, one of the things that they you can look at is last year the Jaguars were outscored by over 10 points per game. This year, coming into today's game, Sunday's game, they were outscored by about 3.5. Now it's 4.5 after they got whipped by Houston. So that's a big jump. And you say, well, they're still getting outscored. True. If you make the same kind of jump next year, you're winning games, and your record is 10-6 or 11-5. The difference this year was they actually gave up more points than they did last year, but the offense was so much better. So if they can make the same kind of difference one year to the next with the defense, and that's a huge if, by the way, then they can make a substantial difference in the fortunes of things here. But, it's interesting how people react. I put a Twitter poll up. What position should the Jaguars take at number 5? Pass rusher, corner, safety, or offensive line. Pass rusher, 137 votes in, is leading with 39%, offensive line at 24%. I actually thought offensive line might have been higher, considering it came on the heels of a game where the Jaguars gave up 8 sacks. And I actually thought 6 of them were on the offensive line. One of them was a coverage sack, and the other was on Bortles. But I'll go back and look at them again and see, but that was my first blush. The offensive line just couldn't block Watt, Merciless, almost anybody else.
Well, certainly the Jaguars felt pressure from the edge, and Jokel did not have a good game, and neither did Sam Young. But when they push the guys to the outside, it's Bortles' job to step up. And at least once he couldn't, because also the interior of the line couldn't withstand it. But a couple of times he just didn't step up. He just is looking downfield, holding the ball, and he's got that internal clock, but pocket presence is perhaps something that's really learned at that level, to have that kind of pocket presence to get the job done. Nonetheless, how many games would they had to have won for you to have said it wasn't a disappointing year?
Well,
they won 5. If they won 7, would you say, well, they're making strides?
Definitely not disappointing at 7. It's so funny. We talk a lot about Vegas and how Vegas has put the number on the game and so forth, and
5.5, right?
5.5, which was my number at the beginning of the year for the over under, and it was close.
5.5. I really wanted to take the over, but I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, I don't think you could.
So my point is, Cole, is that as bad as, because we follow the Jaguars, and if Jaguar fans are very involved and they're watching every game, and they didn't look good today. And I don't know if you can throw today out. If you throw today out, then you also have to throw the Colts game out.
Yeah. I don't think you can throw today out, Sam. And I think it's a great topic to go on, because
can you throw so you think the Colts game can also be indicative of who they are?
I think you have to take everything in there, and it's not just every game is worth one in terms of evaluation.
Right.
You have to remember that they did play, without a number of key players on both sides of the ball today. And so that speaks to where their depth is right now as a team. See Sam Young struggled. Well, Sam Young's a backup tackle. Okay.
Yeah. Come on.
Backup tackle is going to struggle against.
The Colts won with Josh Freeman at quarterback.
Well, no doubt. I mean, and my point being, though, backup tackles are going to struggle against J.J. Watt. Okay.
Well, sure.
That's going to happen. What you have to say is then, is Jokel just playing at the level of a backup tackle, or and can he get any better, and how much better can he get? That to me is the toughest decision in the offseason for the Jaguars to make, because
that decision's already been made. I mean, you talk and you go to the press conferences. Olsen said that it's about power and strength for him, and that they expect him to get more, to get stronger and to get more powerful in this offseason and to show what he can do next year. They're not going to make a move there. And I know, and Twitter's not a real good sample for what the general public thinks, because most people on Twitter, I found, are angry. And so
they're reacting. Yeah, sure.
Well, yeah. And so, but, everybody wants to get rid of Jokel. But I'm just telling you, and I'm not defending him at all. I'm just telling you the decision's been made. Something dramatic would have to happen for them to step away from a guy that they picked with their first-round pick.
Again, it's possible that I am seeing this completely differently than Greg Olsen or Dave Caldwell or anybody else. Yes, strength and power is an issue, but he made the same mistakes today that he made early in the season, that he made last year, that he was quote-unquote working on, ducking his head against the pass rush. Right. At some point,
heck, I saw Zane Beadles do that as well.
Yeah, listen, I
it must be something that comes naturally when you're in there that you do that. But I mean, Beadles is what, a 6th, 7th year player.
Yeah, and so somebody asked me on Twitter a question about Beadles and Cyprien, which I thought was an interesting kind of pairing, and basically my response was, I think Beadles is what he is at this point. It doesn't mean he can't get any better, but he's not going to get appreciably better. And Cyprien, I think, can get appreciably better. Will he is the big question. But going back to the thing on Jokel, you're probably right that they've made the decision, and it's made easier by the fact that there are so many holes to plug on defense right now. But it is so tough to find that left tackle, good pass blockers in this day and age. I'm not saying you give up on them, but if you can't introduce some competition to that spot, I think you're making a huge mistake in the offseason, particularly with $40 million of cap space.
Jonathan Cyprien, if you saw on the replay, took that false step inside as the other guy came out, and as soon as he took that false step, that guy had enough room to catch the ball and get in the end zone. That is a mistake Cyprien was making last year.
Yep.
He was making that mistake as a rookie. Those are the kinds of precision things that Gus Bradley is talking about. You can't make that step. Andre Branch took that step inside when they ran the read option, and then they just pitched out, and the guy ran right past him. So, those are the small little things that we see, that we understand. Cyprien, they think, and I'm just repeating, the things that I found out by being close to people in the organization. They don't know how good Cyprien can be, or if he's already reached that, because they don't think that he's ever played with a free safety worth a darn.
Mm-hmm.
So, so they think that down in the box, that he's a pretty good guy covering the tight end close to the line of scrimmage, coming up to try to make tackles and that. But trying to let him cover guys in space, I mean, you just can't do that. But a free safety who can cover, between the hash marks or maybe even sideline to sideline. I mean, look, Ed Reed made a lot of strong safeties look really good.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a good-looking prospect at free safety in Tallahassee. So that'll be one of the names.
True.
That'll be one of the names that'll come up. Vernon Hargraves at corner will be a name that will come up.
Right, but I mean, they think that James Sample has a chance to be the guy that makes Cyprian better.
Okay,
now, I'm just saying this is the thinking of the organization. But you're right. With $40 million, you've got to go out and now knowing that you've got to win games. No more. We're not in the development game anymore. Okay, as Gus Bradley said at the beginning of this year, this team is built. So we're no longer in the development game. We're in the competition. We're putting good players on the field if we can find them. So they've got a core development of guys, whether it's Bortles and Robinson and Hearns and Senderick Marks and Roy Miller and Paul Posluszny and Telvin Smith. Now you got to go get guys who can play now, because if you don't, you're out of a job next year.
Yeah, and, you're exactly right. That is the big change now, is that you can't afford to groom guys anymore. You've got to have them. And I think if Gus Bradley were asked honestly, that he would probably like to recall that quote of it's built, because it clearly wasn't. And so in terms of their offseason plans, Dante Fowler, how much can you count on him next year? I mean, apparently the rehab's going very well, but you don't know. You've never seen him play in the National Football League. You don't know how good or bad he's going to be.
Right.
They still need to upgrade the pass rush anyway. So I think you can go after, whether it's Joey Bosa at Ohio State or whomever. You got to find some help in the pass rush. You've got to find another linebacker, at least, one who can be a multiple position guy. I don't think that's a high draw. I think you can get that position. I think you probably get one pass rusher in free agency, maybe a flexible linebacker, in free agency at a moderate rate. And if you can find a safety out there, great. Mario Williams is probably going to be let go. He's a little older than a lot of the guys that the Jaguars have targeted in the past. But I don't think you can necessarily, Sam, use the kind of free agents they've brought in the first 3 years to gauge what they're going to do this year. I think they'll go for older, more established free agents this year.
You are exactly correct, because they can't afford to do that. They can't afford to just sign a guy who's in his second contract, a Zane Beatles, who's very serviceable for what they got him for and what they wanted him to do. You've got to get guys who have a year or two left, who are going to be professionals, fit in here, and understand that they have to win now. So, I mean, if a guy like Von Miller's out there, you got to break the bank to get him.
Yeah.
Alex Mack apparently doesn't want to stay in Cleveland. You got to go ahead and get him and sign him. Whomever it is, whatever it takes, even if you spend all your money, because they've been saving their money. And in the NFL, you can't stockpile your money for every year, but you kind of can move it to the next year a little bit.
Yep.
So the Jaguars have plenty now. Now's the time to spend it. It's the reason they didn't try to sign Ndamukong Suh last year, because Dave Caldwell basically told Gus Bradley, not yet. Well, yet.
Yeah, now it's time to spend it. If they don't spend it, I don't know what's going on down there. But so they've got to spend it.
Right.
All right. This is a little bit of a shorter podcast than we usually do, because Sam's got to do TV. The end of the year press conference, the season wrap-up press conference is tomorrow. Is that correct, Sam? Right? Monday?
It is. Players at 11:15, Gus Bradley at noon, and then, by the way, Dave Caldwell on Tuesday at 1 o'clock.
Okay, so probably after Caldwell does his press conference, we'll at some point reconvene and do a little deeper dive on the offseason and the direction of things for the Jaguars. But disappointing, especially, and I'll just finish with this, kind of the way I started. Disappointing, particularly because of the stretch they had midseason, where it looked like they could actually compete and contend in a bad division, and then to kind of fall apart at the end. Again, some of it was injuries, but some of it was just poor play, not beating teams they should have beaten late in the season, particularly at home. That San Diego game really is a tough one to swallow. there will be no. This will be the shortest leash possible for a head coach next year. 3 straight losing seasons and a 4th season. You don't get much benefit of the doubt.
You get 0 at this point, and I mean you can't. I know I read Peter King's thing the other day where he talked about Chuck. He was talking about Chip Kelly. Felt like Kelly didn't get a chance. I mean, there's a guy who had a winning record, got fired.
Mm-hmm.
But he talked about Chuck Noll. He talked about Bill Belichick and their first 3 years in the league and how it takes time to develop the culture and how you want to run practice and what the expectations are and to get the players in there that you want. But with free agency and with how things are done now, there are enough bad teams in the league that you can become a meh team and keep your job. And the Jaguars aren't that yet. I mean, if they have the fifth pick in the draft, they're the 27th best team in the league.
That's right. So we'll talk more about the draft, free agency, everything else coming up here shortly. That'll do it for this season-ending version of the Sam and Cole podcast. Our thanks, as always, to Champion Cycling. If you didn't pick it up for Christmas, great chance to get a deal on it now. So stop on in 3 locations, Arlington, Mandarin, or the Beach. You can follow Sam on Twitter at Sam Kavaris. Follow me on Twitter at Cole Pepper. And subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. We'll have a lot for you in the off season. Thanks so much for tuning in right here to the Sam and Cole podcast.